Hello, everyone. I'm Joyce Groves Holland. I'm the proud great-granddaughter of the man known as the Potato King of the world, Mr. Junius George Groves. The man who went from slavery to freedom, walked all the way from Greene County, Kentucky to Edwardsville, Kansas, to become the first black millionaire west of the Mississippi. Some of you may have heard of the Potato King. Maybe you saw a street in Edwardsville, Kansas named after Junius on the local news, or maybe you read a write-up of a Groves reunion in the newspaper, or attended a celebration of Junius being admitted into some Hall of Fame. Some of you may have found a historic video on the internet, or read a book by a college professor, friend, or relative featuring the Potato King of the world. Regardless, it seems the more stories that are told of him these days, the more people want to know. The questions most asked about the Potato King are, what happened to his fortune? What happened to his immediate family after he passed away? Where and what are the ancestors of Junius doing today? And why haven't we heard about the Potato King before? Since I've recently written a Roots-type limited series about Junius Groves and his immediate family, I have wonderful personal stories that I may share. Many of my stories were handed down by elder family members. I think it beneficial to opine my family's oral history because each time a narrative is done about the Potato King, various elements always change. I pondered the best way to share these stories would be by podcast. I ran the idea by my dear cousin, Mr. Jerome Drew. He said it was something to think on and suggested calling the podcast This Week in the Groves Family. After our conversation, I thought, why not? I'm going to do it. I ask in advance that you pardon me when I segue from one thing to another. I'm known to do that often, hopefully not so much that it's hard to keep up. And this is new for me, so please excuse me if I stumble over my words. And if you hear a little knock here or there, I'm doing this from home. As we travel through time, both past and present during this and future podcasts, I'll invite ancestors of Junius Groves to come and tell their stories passed down from their family patriarch or matriarch about the extraordinary Potato King of the world. And they've got some fascinating stories to tell. For those of you who may not have heard about Junius Groves, allow me to tell you about this extraordinary man. According to a historic weather site, it was an unusual rainy season in Greene County, Kentucky, when Mary Grove gave birth to her seventh child, Junius, on May 13th in 1859 on the William Grove plantation. Her husband Martin was there during their child's birth. Junius's family were slaves on the Grove plantation, residing in one of 3 slave shacks on the property. During my research, I learned that even though Mary and her children lived with Martin on the Grove plantation, they continued to be the property of Albert Anderson, a former Kentucky congressman who owned a neighboring farm. I never found the when or how the 2 slaves, Martin and Mary, met and fell in love, but Mr. Grove and Mr. Anderson were friends, and I imagine that the neighbors had various interactions between their farms, allowing the 2 slaves to meet. Even though slavery was an evil institution, my understanding is that Mr. Grove was more civil than most slave owners. Since Mary and her children resided with Martin on the Grove plantation, I surmise that after the 2 slaves married, Mr. Grove and Mr. Anderson made some amiable and more than likely financial agreement permitting the family to stay together on the Grove farm. I read that Mr. Anderson was an agreeable man. His farm was called the Anderson Free State because after he died, he left some land to his freed slaves. As we all know, slaves took on the last name of their owners. Our family wasn't sure when the S was added to the end of the Grove name. While writing my limited series, I took a little creative turn and claimed that the addition of the S occurred after his father Martin ran away from the Grove farm in April of 1865 to join the Union Army's G Company, the 125th Colored Regiment of the U.S. Infantry Division, stationed in Lebanon, Kentucky at the time. Before there was a wealth of information on the internet, I hired a genealogy service to do some in-depth research for me. On one of the pages I received from them was a copy of Martin Army's enrollment card that read, Martin Grove, joined without consent. No S. I was disappointed, but I let my creative rendition stand that the S was added while he was in the Army. Years later, I was able to obtain more of my great-great-grandfather Martin's Army paperwork, and somewhere in his 47 pages of medical records, someone wrote Groves with the S. So I guess the powers that be showed me that I'm on the right track. Junius's father, Martin, was in the Army for less than a month. Unfortunately, he died of what the Army doctors thought was a disease called the black tongue. Later, it was discovered that Martin truly passed from eating a poisoned pie he purchased from a group of women who visited the Union Army encampments with a wagon full of warm homemade cakes and pies for the Union soldiers to purchase at a nickel each. Actually, those vile women, as a Union officer Lieutenant Wise called them, were the relatives, friends, or wives of Confederate soldiers. Their contribution to the Southern War effort was to sell the poison cakes and pies to the opposing army. Those Confederate women beguiled the Union soldiers with their pretty smiles, warm personalities, and deadly wares. The Union soldiers who imbibed on those baked ungoods, so to speak, became very sick and unable to perform their duties, or they died after ingesting those poisonous concoctions. Before the symptoms of the poison, because the symptoms of the poison they used were similar to those of the black tongue, such as diarrhea, vomiting, mental confusion, and discoloring of the tongue, many soldiers, including my great-great-grandfather Martin, went misdiagnosed. That allowed those heinous women to continue to sell their poisonous wares without worry for a time. Eventually, it was surmised that after each fort the women visited, healthy men grew ill or died after consuming their baked ungoods. Their scheme was eventually found out, and those dastardly women were arrested. Mary had 9 children by Martin. There was James, Catherine, Agnes, Amanda, Mary, Peter, Junius, Virginia, and Robert. The family was released from servitude after the 13th Amendment was ratified to the Constitution. Junius, still a young boy, attended school 3 months out of the year until it was time to work on the farm. It was the Groves family's main source of income after they were freed. Included in the paperwork I received from the genealogist, Junius worked on various farms and at a meatpacking warehouse before traveling to Kansas. Junius grew up to be 5 feet 5 inches tall. Not to be a very big man, he had big dreams. He knew there was more to life than just getting by, and he was going to acquire more through hard work and determination, and he allowed nothing and no one to get in his way. When the Exoduster movement began in 1879, headed by Benjamin Pap Singleton, it put a fire in Junius to move on to the Midwest with hopes of finding a better situation and eventually acquiring his own land. He didn't have the money to pay for the passage with Pap Singleton's group, so he decided to walk all the way, over 525 miles. Most folks don't like walking to the mailbox. Junius started his faithful journey with $1.25 in his pocket, confidence in his abilities, prayer in his heart, and complete faith in the good Lord to guide his way. I imagine he wasn't too concerned about food along the way, since he knew how to live off the land. He could gather greens, mushrooms, nuts and fruits, and berries from nature's supermarket in the woods. If there was a need for anything more, such as beans, coffee, or sugar, he had money enough to purchase it all. Coffee was around 22 cents a pound at the time, and sugar was around 9 cents. At night, I imagine he'd sleep in the woods under the brush, so not to be noticed by the unknown or the unsafe. When Junius arrived in Kansas, he had 90 cents left to his name. He knew he had to find employment soon. Kansas was inundated with an influx of free slaves from all over the country who followed the exoduster movement, so jobs were very scarce. It didn't deter him one bit. He believed that the good Lord didn't bring him all the way to Kansas to leave him wanting. Junius searched for days with no success, but he was resolute to find employment, and eventually he made his way to the Williamson farm in Armadale. Mr. Williamson was a Kentucky native. Whether Mr. Williamson knew of Junius or they had a familiar acquaintance in Kentucky is not known. Regardless, Mr. Williamson wasn't hiring, but Junius wasn't taking no for an answer and made him an offer he couldn't refuse. Junius asked Mr. Williamson, "How much do you pay your farm hands?" He answered 75 cents a day. Junius said, "If you hire me, I'll work for 40 cents a day, and I'll work harder than any other man without complaint." Mr. Williamson asked Junius why he'd work for less money. Junius said, "To prove to you that I mean what I say. I must say that I admire my great-grandfather's fortitude not asking for a handout, but for a chance to use the hands that the good Lord gave him to prove his worth." Mr. Williamson hired him on and was so pleased with Junius's work ethics that after 3 months, Mr. Williamson raised his pay to that of the highest paid farmhand, 75 cents a day. As time went on, Williamson raised Junius's pay to that of the foreman, which was $1.25 a day. Another report read that Junius was made foreman after 3 months. There are conflicting reports, but I believe the foreman title was given to Junius when he worked a 9-acre parcel of land for Mr. Williamson. Okay, I'm getting a little ahead of myself here. After working a year on the Williamson farm, Junius decided to move on to try to find a better situation. He'd saved enough of his earnings to journey about. It was said that he traversed the states of Kansas, Missouri, Oklahoma, and maybe Arkansas. But after much speculation, his true path of travel is not known for sure. After a year of disappointments, he returned to his former place of employment, the Williamson farm in Armadale, Kansas. He returned to the place where his work ethics were appreciated and the pay was better. You may ask, well, why did he leave in the first place since things were going so well? When you have big dreams, you have to follow your heart. Sometimes it will lead you to another place, or it will lead you back to where you started. But you'll never realize your true destiny or be fulfilled until you take that step. Mr. Williamson was quite happy to have Junius return. He apprised Junius that he purchased other parcels of land and he needed someone to farm a 9-acre parcel near Edwardsville. He offered the challenge to Junius, who gladly accepted. Mr. Williamson fronted him a team of horses, the seeds to plant, as well as tools to help him harvest and cultivate the crops. Junius planted 3 acres of Irish potatoes, 3 of watermelon, and 3 of sweet potatoes himself. That's a lot of work for one man. After all the expenses were reimbursed for the aforementioned at the end of the season, Mr. Williamson agreed that Junius would keep a third of the profits. He lived in a little shack located on the property, and after getting the seeds in the ground, Junius decided to marry. His sweetheart was the beautiful Matilda Stewart. Booker T. Washington, who wrote about Junius and Matilda in his book Negroes in Business, said, quote, "How they managed with much difficulty the day after their marriage to get a few yards of soft calico to make a changing suit for Mrs. Groves, so that she might begin work at once in the field by his side, where she's ever been since, his steady companion," unquote. That is so beautiful. Matilda had one dress to wear, and they borrowed money to buy materials so she could sew a garment to wear while she worked by Junius's side in the field with no complaint. I have so much respect for my great-grandmother. She had profound faith in her husband and his dreams and worked hard to help it all come to fruition. I believe that some of the young folks these days can take a lesson from our ancestors. There are so many whiners who expect folks to give them what they didn't earn. I recently saw a video where a girl told her boyfriend that if he couldn't pay to get her hair and nails did, she didn't want him. I didn't watch the whole video, but I hope the young man had sense enough to stop his car at the nearest corner and let the classless girl take the bus home. Personally, I believe if the girl paid attention in school or read a book on occasion, she could get a job to pay well enough to get her own hair and nails done. Pardon the segue. Matilda worked diligently with Junius during planting and harvesting seasons. During the winter months, she helped him gather cut wood and felled branches on the side of the road to take to the city to sell as firewood. That first year, after all the bills were paid, they cleared $125, which is around $4,000 in today's money. In their time, men made all the decisions for the family and women had little or no say. Junius and Matilda made every decision regarding their finances together. Each year, they invested their well-earned money in more land, farm animals, and tools. They never worried about material luxuries at the time, but tried to keep up with the Joneses, so to speak. Matilda didn't whine to Junius. Mrs. Jones has a new Lexus carriage, so I want one too. And Junius didn't say, I'm going to get that new Cadillac wagon with matching horses and a matching pimp hat. Okay, I'm being a little silly here. But the Groves couple was smart and continued to be wise with their finances, and in the end, it all paid off, big time. When Junius purchased 80 acres from a Native American woman, Mrs. Connors, it was said that the land was fallow from overplanting. Junius knew that he and Matilda could enrich the soil and make it fertile enough to produce big and numerous crops due to a scientific method Junius had developed. To acquire the 80 acres, they took their savings of $2,200 at the time to make a down payment on the land and sign a promissory note to pay the remaining balance in a year's time. Matilda and Junius paid off the debt before the year was up. Now we all know there are folks of all races, especially in our own, who seems bothered when another of our race prospers. And it happened to the Groves family when they purchased that 80 acres. Instead of being happy for the Groves couple and offering assistance, as the Groves family would have for their neighbors, the naysayers offered gossip. No, they didn't spend up all that there money buying up that dried old piece of dirt. They's gonna still be paying on it after they's dead. Word got back to Junius regarding the naysayers, and he was dismayed by their negative comments. When he found out who the naysayers were, he saw that they were poor folks who were satisfied with just getting by. The way I write about how Junius approaches the naysayers in my limited series is classic, if I may say so myself. But for now, I'll just say, Junius engaged the naysayers in casual conversation, and before he departed their company, he showed them the bill of sale stamped paid in full in big red letters. Junius wasn't a braggart, but sometimes you have to talk to some folks, especially gossips, in a language that they understand. Eventually the Groves acquired so much land that they were able to stop working for Mr. Williamson, much to his chagrin at losing such a fine worker, and the Groves were able to hire their own farm hands to work their own land. They homesteaded on a property they purchased in Edwardsville. Due to their growing household, Matilda and Junius felt it was time to build themselves a large wooden home to accommodate the family. There was Charles, the oldest, Walter, Frederick, Ida Mae, Aura, and eventually Lillian, Junius Jr., Sylvester, Etnia, John, Cornelius, Theodore, and 2 other children who unfortunately died very young. Junius even built a fine wooden home for his brother Robert, who moved from Kentucky to Indiana, then on to Edwardsville to help his brother on his farm. Their mother, Mary Groves Cox, traveled with Robert to Edwardsville. Mary had remarried at some point, but I'm under the impression that he passed before she moved to Edwardsville. One day, The Grove's elegant wooden home was mysteriously burned to the ground. Through the grace of God, no one perished in the fire. Apparently, there were some heinous folks who weren't too happy with the successful colored businessman having such a fine residence and took it upon themselves to do something about it. Unfortunately, Robert's home met the same fate. I can't think of who may have done such a dastardly deed. My older cousin Lillian, the daughter of Junius Jr., said that during that particular time in history, the Klan would blow up a home with dynamite during a thunderstorm. So when black-owned homes caught fire or exploded, so to speak, it was all attributed to a natural disaster and wasn't thoroughly investigated by the law. Junius was profoundly heartbroken and devastated by the heinous event, but instead of getting mad or even, he built a bigger home, this time of red brick. It was said to be one of the finest homes in the area. Mr. Heim, the president of the Kaw Valley Railroad, told Junius that it was too fine a home to be owned by a colored person, and he offered to buy the home from Junius for $100,000. It cost Junius $22,000 at the time to build this mansion, which would equate to about $840,000 to $1 million in today's value. Of course, Junius turned down the generous but specious offer. Their extraordinary red brick mansion had 22 rooms. There was hot and cold running water in each bedroom, and the Groves had the first of 2 telephones and electricity in the area. Mr. and Mrs. Booker T. Washington and their friend the poet, Mr. Paul Laurence Dunbar, were frequent guests of the Groves family, staying at the mansion during their visits. My uncle, Dr. Wesley Groves, told me that they called the mansion the Big House. Because Junius enjoyed knowledge, he built a large library in his home. He told Booker T. Washington that it was his college. Mr. Washington cited it was one of the finest he'd ever seen in any personal abode. The 3rd floor doubled as a ballroom and skating rink. Cousin Lillian, who lived in the mansion as a child, spoke of a large pantry in the home that had a sliding door. It was full of candy and baked goods, and the children could visit it after their chores were done. The Groves family also owned the Groves Community Center in Edwardsville. It was a place where their children and friends could go and listen to music, dance, and play games. Most of the Groves children graduated college and worked in one of the family businesses after. When the children weren't in school, working on the farm, or in the merchandise store, Junius wanted to keep the family entertained close to home and away from the evil influences of the big city. Heard it didn't work with his daughter, Ida Mae Daisy. Story goes, Ida Mae Daisy would sneak off and hop in the boxcar of a train when it slowed down near a pickup point and ride it into Kansas City. It's said that she'd hang out at a speakeasy or she'd visit a current beau. No, I don't think she was wild, just curious and maybe a little slushy. She was well respected in the community and was adored by the writer and first black director, Mr. Oscar Micheaux. How and where they met, I don't know, but Oscar fell in love with her and even named a character in one of his movies after Ida. Cousin Jerome sent me some old news articles he found about great Auntie Ida. She eventually married a rich farmer, and after he passed, she remarried a rich oil baron. Cousin Lenora Jackson, the niece of grandmother Alice Groves, told me that the Groves children became very excited when told Aunt Ida Mae Daisy was coming for a visit. They jump up and down and yell, "Aunt Ida's coming! Aunt Ida's coming!" Mother Mary Groves Cox resided with Junius and Matilda in the mansion. When Mary woke up, first thing in the morning before she had breakfast, she'd step out onto the 2nd floor balcony next to her room and pray. It said that she'd pray so loud, thanking the good Lord for his many blessings, the whole valley could hear. Can you even imagine Mary's pride in her son? They started as slaves living in a shack to becoming freed folks who lived in one of the finest homes in the country. Prayer works. The Groves were known for their opulent parties. Local businessmen and women, doctors, farmers and farmhands, politicians, bank presidents, educators, and family attended. Cousin Lillian opined that all the children who resided in the mansion would sneak out of their bedrooms and sit on the stairs where the adults wouldn't notice, and they watched the older folks dance around the room to the wonderful melodies the band played. She said that the fabulous Groves parties were something to behold. Cousin Lillian chuckled as she recounted the story of a woman wearing a red dress at one of the amazing parties who danced around the ballroom all by herself. Cousin Lillian said she was like a beautiful butterfly, but because the woman wore red, the children thought she was scandalous. That's what they were told about women who wore red back then. Junius and Matilda eventually acquired over 2,200 acres of land throughout Kansas. In the Groves Crossroad merchandise store, they offered fresh produce and numerous necessities at a fair price, allowing neighbors to shop locally instead of traveling miles to Kansas City. They developed Groves Park, open to all, and Junius built a golf course on their land where anyone could play, and it's believed that he was the first black man in the country to own a golf course. Not to step on the toes of Mr. Bill Powell, another black man who owned, designed, and constructed a professional golf course on his land in 1946. Junius passed away in 1925. Just talking about a history that had been overlooked. Junius was part owner in a casket and embalming company, which was started to offer fair pricing to grieving families. During that era, most funeral parlor owners, regardless of race, took advantage of the lamenting loved ones by overcharging for their services and not delivering the complete final wishes of the departed loved ones. Junius also founded Edwardsville Colored Cemetery and the Grove Cemetery near Franklin/Grinter Heights. Junius started and co-founded various foundations such as the Negro Business League in Kansas, the Kaw Valley Potato Association, and the Sunflower State Association. Junius also gave the money, drew up the design, and participated in the building of the Pleasant Hill Baptist Church in Edwardsville. The family owned stock in banks and mines and hosted the annual barbecue and picnic held each year on their property that people from all over the country would attend. Junius hired as many as 50 farm hands, mostly black, but he also employed white, Native Americans, and Hispanics to work his land. He built fine bunkhouses for the farm hands that offered gas heat and lighting and paid them a fair wage. He had a large warehouse where 6,000 potato seedlings were stored during the winter, and he built a huge barn that housed all the modern-day farm tools. Cousin Lillian said that the children were afraid to play in the barn. It was too dark and scary to venture into. They never knew what kind of crazed monster was hiding behind the many machines or haystacks. Junius had orchards of thousands of apple, pear, and peach trees. He had 250 cherry trees, a vineyard, and various vegetable crops as well as potato crops. Cousin Lillian smiled when she talked about how the children loved running around in the orchards, playing chase games and eating the sweet fruit from the trees, then napping in their cool shade. Junius built a smokehouse, granary, tool house, and hen house. Sometimes the girls would make mud pies with the eggs Cousin Lillian took from the hen house. Cousin Lillian said that she had a very happy childhood. Junius and Matilda, various and numerous crops were very important to all of America, Mexico, and Canada. So the Union Pacific Railroad built a spur through the Groves property to pick up their numerous crops. Whenever a passenger train traversed through Edwardsville, they couldn't help but notice the beautiful Groves mansion at the top of the hill. The commuters marveled at the fine home and surmised that a very important family must reside in such a fine abode. The Kansas City Journal in February of 1900 wrote that Junius G. Groves was the wealthiest colored man in Kansas. It was also written in various other publications near and far that he was the first black millionaire west of the Mississippi. A Finnish paper in Helsinki, Finland, learned that Junius had consistently grown more bushels of potatoes than any other farmer in the world. They bestowed upon him the title of Potato King of the World. And in 1902, the U.S. Department of Agriculture also named Junius the Potato King of the World. And well deserved, I might add, because one year, Junius grew 121,000 more bushels of potato than any other farmer in the entire world. The U.S. award was presented by the Carnegie Steel Company. Junius was admired by neighbors, respected by business folks, politicians, and bankers who professed that Junius was a man whose bills were always paid in a timely manner. Junius donated money and a portion of his crops to the Black Douglas Hospital every season. Mr. and Mrs. Groves also assisted other freed slaves to acquire land at a fair price and employment. When World War I occurred, Junius sent over 21 tons of crops to Europe to help feed our soldiers stationed over there. The Potato King was very altruistic in nature. When Junius noticed a woman with several children venture into his merchandise store with bare feet and ragged clothing, he learned where the family resided and sent boxes of food, clothing, and shoes to the family on numerous occasions anonymously. When a dear friend, Mr. Edward Jackson, lost his life in a train collision, Junius sued the Chicago Rock Island and Union Pacific Railway on the Jackson family's behalf. He won over $5,500 for them. Junius didn't take a dime of the settlement for himself. And twice, when the city of Edwardsville was on the brink of bankruptcy, Junius loaned the city the money needed to stay solvent. Junius said he was just doing his civic duty. Don't know if the city ever fully reimbursed Junius, but those are just 3 of many stories I could speak on. Junius invented a potato sorter which separated and loaded a train car full of potatoes in a short amount of time. His Crossroads merchandise store sold his family's homemade sauerkraut. It was so popular, he developed a machine to slice several heads of cabbage at once to keep up with the demand. Junius had many inventions that unfortunately have been accredited to others or lost to time. Even though there were many threats and attempted perilous actions against him, Junius said that his color was never a hindrance to him. It may have bothered others, but he had important things to do and didn't care what negative folks had to say. And Junius refused to allow the heinous actions of discriminating zealots to hinder him or impede his progress. The area in Edwardsville where the Groves family lived was called by people of all races Grove Center, the land of the beautiful people, because they were, inside and out. The women and men, all shades from very light to tan to brown and black, were gorgeous. The men and girls had natural, wavy, or straight hair, from short to long, that was always well styled. And the family was consistently well groomed, well mannered, and courteous to everyone they met. Great-grandfather Junius had hazel eyes as well as his brother Robert. Junius was dedicated to Matilda during their marriage. They stayed together until his death in August of 1925. Matilda passed away 5 years later in November of 1930. Now, his brother, my great-uncle Robert, was a different story. He had 2 marriages. Both women were named Mary. The second marriage was to the babysitter. It said he sired 24 children. Great-uncle Robert was laying them and slaying them, as some of the players of today may say. Some of his young'uns were born out of wedlock, so there could have been more. I think the family got tired of counting after 24. I'd hate to say that Uncle Robert was a slut, because after all, he was my great uncle. Instead, I'll just say that he was a little slushy. Moving on. Edwardsville was the Potato King's kingdom, so to speak. Because of it, my pretty little niece Alicia Joyce says that she's a princess. According to Booker T. Washington, the Groves couple remained humble, never boasted about their accomplishments, gave back to the community, and helped anyone, no matter their race, to get a hand up. Junius remembered to always give thanks to Father God and Jesus the Christ for every gift, every blessing, and every opportunity. As I mentioned earlier, my great-grandfather wasn't a tall man, but he was a great man. He wasn't an up-in-your-face man, just a kind, fearless man who allowed no one to stand in the way of him accomplishing his dreams. And he did. As time goes on, I will reveal more about my great-grandfather and his family, past and present. For now, another segue. I'd like to share with you my memories of living in Edwardsville as a child. My great-grandfather had long since passed, but 5 of his sons, Walter, Ora, Fred, Cornelius, and Junius Jr., still lived in the area. My father, Eddie Groves, was the son of Walter Groves and Alice Anderson Groves. Walter was the Potato King's second child. My dad, Eddie, had 3 brothers and 1 sister. There was my Uncle Weldon, who eventually became a Tuskegee Airman, my Uncle Jerry, who served with the 93rd Infantry, my beautiful Aunt Joyce, who eventually married a Navy man, my Uncle Wesley, who did his residency at an Army hospital in Hawaii, and my dad, Eddie, who became a triple nickel, the first black paratroopers and the first to jump the daisy line. They were a warm, close-knit family until Dad had a sip too much of his wild turkey. My mother and father met while he was in the Army in North Carolina. They married, and due to her urging, he left the military and they moved back to his home in Edwardsville, Kansas. The marriage didn't last very long, and they divorced when I was very young. My father won custody of us, Mark, me, and Henry. Before they separated, my father was in the process of building a home for the family. But after the divorce, my father decided to stay in the family home that the Potato King gifted my grandfather Walter and grandmother Alice when they were married. My father had built-in babysitters, you may say. Whenever I think of Edwardsville, I smile. I remember family meals around the kitchen table where all the family sat and said grace before eating and conversed about their day. There was always a variety of food to choose from. Most came from the large family garden that my father Eddie and Grandpa Walt planted every year. The neighborhood had handsome, upkept houses with manicured lawns and bright, colorful flowers that decorated many of the yards, and the street was free of debris. I liked most walking barefoot on the carpet of soft emerald green grass in our yard and enjoying the heavenly scent of the freshly cut lawn that lingered for hours in the warm summer breeze. I adored the sunflowers that grew tall on the side of the old house. They grew on the side of the old outhouse in the backyard corner of our yard, still standing from a time gone by. The sunflowers always seemed to smile at me whenever I passed them by. To this day, they are my favorite flower. I thoroughly enjoyed the times my grandmother Alice led us outside at night to look up at the luminous stars in the clear Kansas sky. She'd regale us with the wonderful and exciting stories of the various constellations which seemed to come to life as we watched. My younger brother Henry was and is my best friend. We used to slip off and play in the nearby creek, running and splashing in the cool water in the summertime and catching tadpoles in our little hands. They made us laugh when they wiggled in our tiny palms trying to get away. We always released them back into the water before returning home. Our sweet grandmother Alice Grove scolded us about wandering off to the creek. She warned us of the snakes that lived under the rocks who may try to bite us and told us to stay away. But Henry and I didn't listen and returned to our fun place again and again. So one day my grandmother had had enough of our sneaking off to the creek and ordered us to get a switch so she could dole out our punishment for being disobedient. Of course, Henry and I thought we were slick and picked the tiniest switch we could find, not realizing it stung more than the larger ones. We snickered when we handed our tiny weapon of mass destruction to our grandmother. After she removed the tiny leaves, she tagged us once on our little legs, and Henry and I took off running so not to get hit again. At some point during our escape, I glanced over my shoulder to see our grandmother was not only keeping up with us, but she was closing in. I guess those orthopedic shoes added a little pep in her step. Needless to say, we stayed away from the creek after that. Well, for a little while. I enjoyed climbing one of the many trees in our yard with my brothers Mark and Henry, especially the mulberry, apple, and pear trees. We picked the fruit right from the branches and ate it right then and there. Or we picked the sweetest grapes from one of the two grapevines. We weren't concerned with washing the fruit. The rain from the last storm washed away all that was unnecessary. If any bugs were still present, oh well, protein. Besides, Jesus said, it's not what you put in your mouth, it's what comes out of it. In our backyard, there was always some fun adventure to have. My father built me and my brothers a tree house in one of the thick trees that we play in on occasion. There was also a swing set and a huge tire hanging on a thick rope from the tree for us to swing on. Whenever we played in the yard on a certain day of the week, our great Aunt Marcella, who lived in the house next to us and was the wife of the Potato King's son, Ora, she'd bake her famous cinnamon rolls and would bring us some to enjoy, fresh from the oven. We were taught to wash our hands before eating, but those cinnamon rolls were too good to wait on. Besides, we'd have to wash our hands anyway after we were done eating the warm, delightful goodie. We had to wash off all the sticky cinnamon that rolled off the side of the buns onto our little fingers. We could only lick off so much of it. I adored sweet great Aunt Marcella, but her daughter Louise was another matter. Cousin Louise was around my father's age, and she lived in the house next to her mother and father, which made her hard to avoid. Great Aunt Marcella was soft-spoken and kind. Cousin Louise was loud and crass, said what she wanted when she wanted, and her language would make a sailor blush. Cousin Louise had many beautiful roses of all colors and varieties growing around her home. One day I picked a pretty red rose from her garden. She yelled at me through her open screened window, "You better leave my flowers alone," she demanded. My sweet and beautiful Aunt Joyce was visiting with Cousin Louise that day. Aunt Joyce later told me that after Cousin Louise yelled at me, they heard me declare, "One day I'm going to beat the hell out of that Louise." They laughed at hearing the ominous threat coming from a 5-year-old little girl. I wonder where I got that from. I was happy my father didn't hear Cousin Louise yell at me that particular time. He'd yell back at her and warn her not to holler at his children. Cousin Louise would fuss right back at him, saying she would yell at who she darn well pleased in more colorful language. Dad warned, "If you yell at my children again, I'll shoot you." She'd return, "I already yelled at them. Go on and get your gun. I got one too." Then Dad would go get his gun and Cousin Louise would get hers. Then the shooting frenzy back and forth became, then the shouting frenzy back and forth became a shooting frenzy back and forth with live rounds. Everyone in the area would run for cover. My grandmother Alice shuffled us children in the house and told us that Dad and Louise were shooting off fireworks. Dad and Cousin Louise continued shooting back and forth at each other, hiding behind this tree and that, and reloading until someone called the police. When the police arrived, usually white officers, my dad and Cousin Louise would casually sit on our porch steps with guns in hand and act like nothing happened, with spent shells all over the yard and at their feet. They were never arrested, to my surprise. True story. Regardless of the aforementioned, there was always some fun family affair to enjoy. Picnics, fishing, parades, going to the movies or zoo. The church the Potato King built, Pleasant Hill Baptist Church, was adjacent to our backyard. My family allowed the church to hold various activities or events in our large yard, which were always fun. Sometimes, on the days when there was no service at the church, me, Mark, Henry, and our older cousin Toyan would explore the building. Toyan was the granddaughter of Junius Jr. and lived across the street from us. Toyan was 7, Mark was 6, I was 5, and Henry was 4. The church was so pretty inside, I recall. There was always a sense of peace whenever I stepped inside that wonderful building. On one of our church adventures, Toyan, who was the boss of us, took us to a secret place near the pulpit and in front of where the choir sat. She pulled up a trap door, and underneath was a large tub-looking thing where Toyan said baptisms occurred. She said that the preacher dunked folks underwater to clean up their dirty souls. She warned us to never let the preacher baptize us, because if he accidentally let us go, a big wave under the baptismal water would sweep us far away, and we'd end up in the middle of the ocean somewhere with Cecil the sea-sick sea serpent, never to be seen again. Needless to say, when my grandmother suggested that I get baptized, I adamantly, wholeheartedly, vehemently refused. She never understood why I was so afraid of being baptized. I never revealed to her or anyone the story our little heathen cousin Toyan opined. Every Sunday morning, my grandmother sent us off to Sunday school with money to put in the collection box. Toy, as we called Toyan, told me that I could get change back from the collection box, and together we could go get candy from the neighborhood store. So I did, and after Sunday school, we skipped to Stafford's Market. I got a Three Musketeer bar. It was my favorite. By the time I got home, my grandmother had been apprised from tattletale little brother Henry about my endeavor, and with her sweet chastisement without the switch, she said, "If you shortchange God, you get shortchanged on your blessings." I could live with that, as long as God didn't say to me when I reached heaven, the elevator down is over there, and where you're going, there's no Three Musketeer candy bars. I loved playing at Toy's house. In her backyard was a huge walnut tree. I loved picking up the newly felled nut and cracking it open, which seemed to take forever with my small hands and the oversized hammer. But once I cracked it open and enjoyed the prize inside, it was worth every effort. The stuff we buy in the stores today holds no comparison when it comes to flavor. I didn't like it when Toy and my brother Mark got BB guns as gifts. Mark and Toy asked my brother Henry and I to stand in front of a big tree in our front yard so they could shoot at us. I can't believe they thought we were stupid enough to do it. Well, we did stand next to the tree, but I adamantly refused to let her shoot at me, claiming it would hurt. She promised it wouldn't with a little side smirk. But just as she took aim, Great Aunt Minnie, who lived next door and was married to Great Uncle Fred, another son of the Potato King, she rushed onto her porch and scolded us for playing a dangerous game that could put our eyes out, and warned Toy and Mark to put up their BB guns before she got a switch to them. I was happy for that scolding, and made sure to stay inside whenever I saw Toy the Menace canvassing the neighborhood with her BB gun. My brother Henry and I sometimes walked down the street to the Stafford's Neighborhood Market, located at the corner of 98th Street and Caw Drive. It was okay for a 5- and 4-year-old to walk a couple of blocks to the store back then. We'd purchase some penny candy or cigarettes for Dad, or we'd swing from the branches of their weeping willow tree growing tall next to the store's parking lot. We were probably 2 or 3 inches off the ground as we swung back and forth, but we thought we were swinging high enough to touch the clouds in the sky. It's amazing how gigantic things look when you're little. There was also a stone wall in front of the parking area of the corner market. When Henry and I felt adventurous, we tried to climb that very tall structure as high as Mount Everest. Even tried to give each other a boost up on occasion. Eventually, we give up and just walk around it. When we revisited that wall as young adults, we saw that the wall couldn't have been more than a foot and a half tall. We laughed about our misconception of the monstrous wall, even to this very day. Whenever there was a bad storm and the lights went out in Edwardsville, the family in the area walked over to our home with their glowing lanterns in hand, lighting the way. The adults gathered in our living room and talked about this or that, or they'd have the children sing for them. I'd do a rendition of some song or another, and they seemed to enjoy it. I recall an elderly woman on a bus giving me a roll of red ribbon for singing for her once. I guess I was pretty good, or either she thought I was scandalous. At night, I was lulled to sleep by the melody of the churring choir of crickets. Excuse me. At night, I was lulled to sleep by the melody the churring choir of crickets made in the yard, or at the soothing sound of the train passing by on the nearby tracks, the Union Pacific Railroad built for my great-grandfather those many years ago. I especially appreciated the serene sound of the train. I especially appreciated the serene sound of the train whistle. My brother Henry and I enjoy the same to this very day. Wherever I may be, when I hear the sound of a train whistle, I smile. One day, after I turned 6, my father received a letter in the mail that upset him. I learned later that it was from the courts and my mother had finally won custody of my brothers and me, and we had to go live with her. I didn't want to go because I didn't remember her, and it meant leaving all that was safe and familiar behind. I believed my getting that change back from the collection box in church was God punishing me. As I grew older, I realized it was just life. With life come changes, be what they may. My mother's second husband was an entertainer, a Grammy winner, and Rock and Roll Hall of Famer. He was lauded as a major influence on the rock band The Rolling Stones by Jerry Wexler, one of the founders of Atlantic Records. And before fame, Jimi Hendrix played in his backup band. There were many perks to being an entertainer's kid, but I missed home. I didn't return to Edwardsville until I was 17. I was in my last year of high school and I was given permission to spend it in Kansas with my dad and my grandmother Groves. My grandfather Walt passed away a few years before from cancer. I wondered why folks always whispered the cancer word back then, or they called it the C word. My dad remarried a nice lady named Nacha. They had 3 more children, lovely Alicia, sweet Vicente, and Jerry the Hun. I was happy to return to Edwardsville. Living in Edwardsville was the happiest time of my childhood. All of the fond past memories were renewed. Some family members were gone. Others were older, but still everyone was warm and loving. I was happy that the family outings, dinners, events, and gatherings continued. The beautiful and historic Pleasant Hill Baptist Church was gone, much to my dismay. A new one was built on the land located on the other side of the creek my brother Henry and I used to explore. I no longer desired to explore the creek. Grandmother was right. Too many snakes. Cousin Louise had passed away as well. I asked someone if my dad had finally shot her. They opined that she had the C word. Well, my dad did own a Colt 45, but everyone assured me that her passing had to do with illness. Maybe she was allergic to the bullet. Moving on. Cousin Louise was at times an arguing mess, but I must admit, I liked her. She had a heart of gold. If need be, she'd give you the shirt off her back after cussing you out for being stupid enough to lose yours. Edwardsville didn't have a school, so I rode a school bus several miles down the road to Bonner Springs High School. In my sociology class, my teacher expressed that he wanted to write a book about the Groves family because we had a fascinating history. That took me by surprise. Before I learned all the wonderful things about my great-grandfather Junius Groves, I just thought he grew a lot of potatoes. Good for him. At the time, I had no idea how extraordinary he truly was. Little did I know that during my research, I'd find the many wonderful surprises of my life about the Potato King of the world and my family. I hope you all enjoyed today's story. Until next time, have a happy day, as my son Stephen G. Holland used to say. Be kind to others and thankful to Jesus for every gift, every blessing, and every opportunity. And be grateful for another beautiful day above ground and not 6 feet under it.